Sometimes, you find yourself sitting in a quiet room. No music, no notifications, no voices in the background. Just silence. And yet, it doesn't feel empty. It feels loud. Not loud in the way noise is loud, not like traffic or people talking or a TV playing in the background. This is different. This kind of loudness comes from somewhere inside you. At first, it's subtle. A single thought, something small, almost unnoticeable. Maybe it's a memory. Maybe it's a random question. Maybe it's just a feeling you can't quite explain. And then, another thought appears. And another. And another. Before you even realize it, your mind is no longer quiet. It's full. You start replaying things. Conversation. Moments. Words you said, and words you didn't. You think about something that happened earlier today, then something from last week, then something from years ago. And suddenly, this quiet room doesn't feel quiet anymore. It feels overwhelming. That's the strange thing about silence. On the outside, it looks like nothing is happening. But on the inside, everything is happening at once. During the day, this rarely happens. Because during the day, your attention is somewhere else. You're busy, scrolling, working, talking, listening. Your mind is constantly occupied. It doesn't have time to turn inward. But the moment everything stops, the moment the distractions fade away, your mind has nowhere else to go. So it goes back to you. And that's when silence starts to feel loud. Because silence doesn't bring noise. It reveals it. It reveals everything that was already there, waiting. Every unresolved thought, every unfinished feeling, every question you avoided, all of it comes forward. And the truth is, most of us are not used to hearing ourselves this clearly. We're used to reacting, responding, moving quickly from one thing to the next. But silence slows everything down. And when things slow down, you start to notice more. You notice how often your mind jumps from one thought to another. You notice how certain memories carry more weight than others. You notice how some feelings don't just disappear. They stay, waiting for a moment like this. There's also something else happening. Something deeper. When there's external noise, you have control. You can change the song, skip the video, walk away from a conversation. But when there's silence, you lose that control. You can't choose what thought comes next. You can't pause your mind. You can't mute your own awareness. And that lack of control can feel uncomfortable. Because not every thought is easy to face. Some thoughts bring regret. Some bring doubt. Some bring questions you don't have answers to. And in silence, there's nowhere to hide from them. That's why people avoid silence. They keep something playing in the background. Music, podcasts, videos. Even when they're not really paying attention, they just don't want it to be quiet. Because they know, if it gets too quiet, their thoughts will get louder. And thoughts are unpredictable. Sometimes they're harmless, random, meaningless. But other times, they go deeper. They start asking things like, am I where I thought I would be by now? Did I make the right choices? Is this really what I want? These questions don't show up when you're busy. They wait. And silence gives them space. Another reason silence feels loud is because your mind amplifies what it focuses on. When there's no external input, your internal world becomes the main source of stimulation. And your brain turns up the volume. A small worry becomes a big concern. A simple memory becomes emotional. A passing thought becomes something you analyze over and over again. This is where overthinking begins. You take one idea and you follow it. Then you branch off into another, then another, until you're stuck in a loop, replaying the same situation, reanalyzing the same details, trying to find answers that may not even exist. And loops are loud because they don't stop. They repeat again and again and again. That's why silence can feel exhausting. Not because nothing is happening, but because too much is happening. But this isn't the full picture. Because silence is not just overwhelming. It's also revealing. If you stay in it long enough, something begins to change. At first, your thoughts are chaotic, fast, unorganized, heavy. But if you don't run from them, if you don't distract yourself, if you just sit with them, they start to slow down. It's almost like watching a crowded room gradually empty. At the beginning, there's noise everywhere, voices overlapping, movement in every direction. But over time, people leave. The room becomes quieter, the noise fades, and eventually, there's space. That's what happens in your mind. Silence doesn't just make things louder. It gives them a chance to settle. And when they settle, you start to see things clearly. A situation that felt confusing begins to make sense. A feeling that felt overwhelming becomes understandable. A question that felt heavy becomes manageable. This is where silence changes. It stops being something you avoid and starts becoming something you can use. Because in that quiet, you're not just hearing noise. You're understanding it. You're processing it. You're making sense of it. And that's something you can't do when you're constantly distracted. But there's a difference between being in silence and being lost in it. If you get pulled into every thought, if you chase every feeling, if you let your mind run without awareness, then silence turns into overthinking. But if you step back and observe, then silence becomes clarity. It becomes space. It becomes perspective. The thoughts are still there, but they don't control you. You notice them without getting stuck in them. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not reacting. You're choosing. You're choosing which thoughts matter, which ones don't. You're choosing what to hold on to and what to let go of. There's also something deeper happening in silence. It has to do with identity. During the day, you play roles. You're a friend, a worker, a student, a part of different situations. And in each of those roles, you behave a certain way. But when you're alone, when there's no one watching, no expectations, no roles to perform, who are you then? Silence brings you face to face with that question. And the answer isn't always clear. Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes it's incomplete. Sometimes it doesn't match the version of yourself you show to others. And that can feel uncomfortable because it's raw, it's real, but it's also honest. Silence strips away everything unnecessary. And what remains is something closer to the truth. And from that place, you can rebuild. You can decide what matters to you, what doesn't, what you want to change, what you want to keep. That's the part of silence people don't talk about. It doesn't just expose you. It gives you the chance to understand yourself. And understanding is where change begins. There's also a connection between silence and loneliness. They often show up together, but they're not the same thing. Loneliness is the feeling of missing someone. Silence is the absence of noise. But when you're alone, and it's quiet, those two things can overlap. And when they do, the feeling becomes heavier. Because now, you're not just hearing your thoughts, you're feeling the absence of something else, someone else. And if you're not comfortable with that feeling, silence becomes difficult. But over time, something shifts. If you stop resisting it, if you allow yourself to sit with it, you begin to adapt. The same silence that once felt overwhelming starts to feel calm. The same thoughts that once felt loud become quieter. Not because they disappeared, but because your relationship with them changed. You're no longer fighting them. You're no longer trying to escape. You're just there, present. And in that presence, something rare happens. You experience life without distraction, not thinking about the past, not worrying about the future, just being. And that kind of moment is simple, but powerful, because most of the time, we're not really present. We're thinking ahead, looking back, reacting, planning. But silence brings you here, to this moment, to what's actually happening right now. And when you stay there long enough, the loudness fades, the mind softens, the noise quiets down, and what remains is something steady, something clear, something real. That's when silence changes. It's no longer something you avoid. It becomes something you return to, because now it doesn't overwhelm you. It grounds you. It doesn't confuse you. It clarifies things. It doesn't make you feel lost. It helps you understand where you are. And maybe that's the point. Maybe silence feels loud, not because it's empty, but because it's full of everything you've been avoiding. And once you stop avoiding it, once you learn to listen, it stops being noise and starts becoming meaning. And eventually, silence doesn't feel loud anymore. It feels like understanding. It feels like clarity. It feels like you.